dirt road off a 2-lane past a shot-up county sign. Squeaking of a backyard screen door letting you know that it's
The Putnam Personalities podcast exists to highlight the good, the positive, and the inspirational in our community. This episode is not an endorsement of any political or religious ideology. This podcast is a simple interview to get to know our friends, neighbors, leaders, and colleagues on a more personal level. Sit back, grab some sweet tea, and enjoy today's interview.
like home to me.
You know, I'm trying to look pretty, but
All good.
anyway. So normally I get to say, I'm glad to have JR meeting with me, but today I'm meeting with you.
Yes.
And I'm actually in your office and with your stuff everywhere. You got a little button. I'm not going to put it on because
No.
it shows that, I don't want anybody to think I'm being partial.
No, a little bit of swag.
Look, there you go, swag. I do have a perfect view though outside. We have Crescent City Lake.
Lake Crescent, yes.
Or Lake Crescent, and this rundown barn, which I love. That is just like a classic look, and I love it.
It is a classic look, but it needs to come down. It's the last hurricane, which was several years ago, put it in the state it's in, and ever since then I've been saying we're going to take it, and we haven't had the heart to do it.
I mean, you can sell tickets and let people do photography out here.
Oh my God!
I mean, people would pay to. I'm serious. People would pay to get a picture for anything.
Well, we are
beautiful.
truly blessed to be on this site, and our family's been here a long time, so it's a wonderful place to work.
All right, so you're running for office, county commissioner,
District 1.
District 1, which is in this. Is that this area?
It is this area, and District 1, when you came down from Palatka, you crossed the Dunks Creek Bridge, and 99% of everything south of the Dunks Creek Bridge in South Putnam is District 1. There's a small piece carved out on the right as you come down that's in a different district.
Okay, so where do we hit the border at? Like where do we stop heading down the highway here?
To the county line.
Which is, where does it end though? What is it? Crescent City the last? So
Yep.
Crescent City's the last.
Crescent City's the last municipality. I'm going to say there's Crescent City, Georgetown, Fruitland, Willaca, Pomona Park, Lake Como, Satsuma. That's, I think,
Predominantly it.
predominantly it. Yeah.
Willaca? No?
Yes, Willaca is here.
Willaca's-
Willaca's here. If I miss Willaca, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I did an interview in Willaca. Normally, everything's done at the church there in Hollister.
Yeah.
It's not a political podcast. It's not religious, but we do it at the church because I live there and that's, a convenient place. But I had the opportunity to come with you today here. I'm in your office, and this is a place where you work every day.
Yeah, we do, we're a cut foliage operation. We do cut greenery, decorative cut greenery, and muscadine grapes. And some people in the county know what cut greenery is. The Tri-County area of northwest Volusia, and the eastern Lake County, northeastern Lake County, and southern Putnam County used to be the fern capital of the world. And
Okay.
for many, many years, up until probably the late 90s, literally 95% of all the cut foliage to the world's flower market came out of this area.
Awesome. I didn't know that. I noticed a couple years ago when I had a side job, I would have to go through, is it Pearson?
Yes.
And there's a lot out there as well.
Yes, that's the hub.
Okay. So your family started this business here?
Yes. Our family came here in the late 1800s
Okay.
from Arkansas, Tennessee, originally from Germany, but kind of filtered down here. And I guess that would be my great-grandfather. Anyway, he married a lady, came here, been here for a while, married a lady whose father had a large landholding here. He died, she inherited it, and the Newbold property was really huge at one point, one little brief moment in time. And anyway, not only did he have a lot of land, he had a lot of debt, so they had to sell a good portion of that. They built our original home site just about equivalent of 2 city blocks north of here. And then one of the sons got this piece of property. They built the 2-story home next to us in 1907, 09. And they were they were masons by trade, but this piece of property had 2 acres of citrus on it. So they started dabbling with citrus as a side, and they were doing masonry work over in St. Augustine at the time, and there was another family from the Georgetown, Freeland area, the Melzers, were a German immigrant family who were just renowned in the area as carpenters. And they built the home. They started tending their 2 acres of grove, and there were lots of people from up north that were putting in groves at that time, and it was just a big boom time. They started caring for other people's groves, and then they'd add a little piece and add a little piece. And over time, I guess when my dad got back from college, we had about 100 acres of citrus and still had the grove care business. But my grandfather was just an amateur botanist. He liked camellias and grafting citrus trees, and fern had started in Pearson. Well, fern started in Ilaha in the middle 1800s as well, but late 1800s. So everybody had a little fern in their backyard, and some people were, little businesses going. My grandfather kind of diversified from citrus into the cut foliage. They started shipping fern in 1941, 42, 43. And the fern kept getting a little bigger, and the citrus kept getting a little smaller or not really growing. And my dad got out of college and came back and looked at the whole thing and realized if you had 100 acres of citrus, you weren't really a profitable citrus business. And so he started growing the cut foliage side of the business, started shrinking the citrus side, and thank God, because I guess when I was in high school in 85 and 86, we had back-to-back terrible freezes. It really just wiped out the citrus industry in this part of the world. Everything now, 95% of all the citrus is grown kind of from south of Atlanta.
Haines City and all that area.
All the way down to South Florida. And so it's a nice evolution over time. We had started putting in muscadine grapes out 18, 19 years ago. It's just a little diversification. There was, where the cut foliage industry was, this was the fern capital of the world. It was so successful, lots of other people would look at it, and you get doctors and lawyers and everybody and their brother putting in fern. There came a time we had way too much fern, and some local growers went to Costa Rica and Central America and started growing there and created more competition. Anyway, the cut foliage business has been shrinking for a while now. I guess when I got out of college, there were probably 180, 200 shippers. And those were people that would grow it and ship it all over the world. And now there's probably maybe 50, maybe 50.
Really?
So it's a changing
dynamic.
Yeah, it is.
That's interesting. So the muscadine grapes, do you sell them as a cluster? Do you send them to a winery, or what do you do with those?
We only grow one variety, Noble muscadine. It's a red and big, large marble. It's all for wine.
Okay.
For production of wine. I don't make any wine as of yet.
Right.
But we've, as a matter of fact, in 2 weeks, all my testing supplies are what's cluttering up another room there. We'll be harvesting probably in 2 weeks, so we'll start testing them for sweetness and acid and pH. And when they're ready, the harvesting crew team will come in. They bring in, we supply some labor. They bring in a harvesting machine, which is quite a sight to see.
Is that one of the ones that clamps and shakes?
It doesn't clamp, but
Okay.
it shakes.
Okay.
It's moving all the time and shaking all the time. And it's a contraption. It's a 3-wheeled machine. So it's a giant tricycle, and the front wheel is off center, and it's hydraulically driven. And our trellis is about 5 feet high, and this thing straddles over that trellis, drives down the long wire, and the insides of this thing are hanging, and they squeeze in hydraulically on the trellis and vine, and they just vibrate like the dickens. And the grapes fall off, they fall down, and underneath all of that, there's a series of flat flaps. They look like kind of fish scales that kind of run together, and then they come together in the front and on the bottom. All the grapes fall off. They fall into these little bins. These bins are rotating around all the time. When they get to the top, they just gravity fall into a chute, and that chute goes over to the next row, and we're there with a tractor and bins to catch it.
Oh, wow.
So it is
Pretty neat operation.
It's a neat operation.
Awesome. So how many do you guys measure by pounds going out of here, or tons, I assume?
They sell by the ton, and we will, that tractor that runs beside the, adjacent to the harvester has 2 or 3 bins on the trailer, and you'll, just depending how they come set up any given year, you'll take those 2 tons, another tractor will pull in to keep catching it. So we will, over the course of the day, I think our highest production to date was about, 90, 95 tons in the season. So last year was a awful production year. We didn't nearly make our norms, but this year the crop looks good.
Good.
And those, we will load those. We'll put 20 or 22 bins, a ton a piece, on a flatbed trailer, strap it all down, and they shoot it off to the winery.
Awesome. That's quite a process.
It's a process. It's something to see.
That's good. So behind you, you have pictures of your great-grandpa, you were telling me. You have your grandpa, your dad. You have some bottles as well. Anything special about those bottles, or just decorative?
Well, as kids, we just grew up bottle hunting, airhead hunting. We would walk the shoreline, walk the water, look for old dumps or old buildings that we dig around.
Mainly in this area, or
just in this area?
Okay.
Well, I shouldn't say that, because once you start collecting, it turns into kind of a fever. So we will pick up some bottles if we're on vacation and hit an antique shop or a flea market or a yard sale or whatever. You find something really cool, we'll pick it up.
I got to a yard sale one time, and they had a bunch of bottles, and I said, how much you want for the bottles? She's like, well, how many do you want? I said, it was a huge black garbage bag. I said, well, I'll take how much for the whole bag? Well, she starts selling me the story. She says, this is in Spring Hill. She's like, well, the house burned down in Tampa. It was our neighbor. And we started digging and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, oh, great. How much do you want for the bottles? She's like, I guess you can have them all for $5. I'm like, $5? I'm like, man, if you told me 10, I would have taken them without the whole story, But so I bought them, and I was so excited. And I got home, and I had them all laid out. I soaked them overnight, trying to get some of the yuck out of them. And we had some teenagers from our church go. They're like, what is all this? I'm like, they're old bottles. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, but they're old bottles. So that at the church the next day, they're all like, guess what? We got old bottles with dirt in it. It was like a big joke. And I was like, you guys just don't get it, But I went through those bottles, and I had like spot bottles, and I found a milk jug that I looked up and found out the milk jug company went bankrupt during the Great Depression.
Wow.
So I'm like, if they went bankrupt in the Great Depression, then this bottle is 100 years old, at least. And so I was trying to share it, but they still didn't understand the excitement of it. But since then, I've dwindled away quite a few of them. I only have about maybe 20 left, but I love old bottles, old vessels, things like that.
Yeah, they're fun. They're neat.
Yeah.
They're like they're from Alaska.
Oh, really? Yeah, I noticed the purple tint.
Yeah, the purple one. And I had no idea how they did the purple, but really, they just a little bit of sand.
You mind if I?
Oh, yeah, please.
Is it? Yeah, right there. Placa Bottling Works, Placa, Florida.
Yeah.
Registered this bottle not to be sold. How much you pay for it? I'm just kidding.
No, we found it.
No, it's not to be sold. So that's a heavy bottle too.
It is.
It's super heavy. So I wonder what was in this thing.
I don't know. I don't know if it was ale or a cola or I don't know, bottling works. I don't know.
It might have killed somebody. Somebody could get hit over the head with this thing. This thing as a weighted bottle. Yeah. So that's really cool. That's really interesting. So
but we've arrowheads, and we walked that shoreline as a kid for miles and miles and miles and miles.
I had an interview yesterday with one of our men that's running in the area, and he brought a spearhead and a arrowhead with him.
Yeah.
And he actually found them on our church property. His grandma donated the property to our church
No way.
60-something years ago. He said, I found these when it was wooded right here. and the spearhead was pretty long, like 6
Wow.
inches long. It was huge. It looked brand new. He's like, no, I've had this since I was a kid. I was like, wow. He said it might be like around 2,000 years old or something. I don't know.
There's no doubt.
So
very likely.
yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty neat how all that works out.
Yeah, well, I hate to run us around.
Yeah.
This little, I think it is, I don't know if it's 10, I have no idea what it is, but
Right.
little cup. We were looking for airheads about a quarter mile north of here, and there was an old spring off the shoreline, and it kind of meanders around and then has what we call a waterfall. You know, it was about this high.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
A Florida waterfall.
that's right. The water would just flow out into the lake, and we looked there all the time, and the little spring wasn't flowing that well. So we thought, well, you know, what's up? It's probably full of trash. Anyway, we got back there, and sure enough, there were limbs and junk there in it. So we started pulling that out, and my buddy said, look, we're going to find bottles here. I know it, because word was that was where one of the steam ships would come and drop, because there was a post office there. And that was a spot. They stopped on the lake, delivered the mail, and the locals would come get it. And in this spring, it was bricked around the outside edge, like a well. And there was a beam, and I don't know what size it was, like a 2x8 or so. And that darn thing was hanging on a nail on that beam in that spring.
Really?
It was the craziest thing.
That's pretty neat.
It is neat. It's
got the initials PDL on the bottom. Ponce de Leon, maybe? No, I'm just kidding. No. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But it is
very thin and
it was
awesome.
A great find.
I love finding stuff like that. We had a guy come to our church and he had a metal detector and did some. I noticed you had one in here too, somewhere. I think behind me. So
Yeah,
that's pretty neat.
Mine's not for a hobby. I'm involved in a cemetery association.
Oh, okay.
And so we're opening a new area, and it has been platted in the past. So we have a written plat that a surveyor did for us, and there's steel pins down every 8 feet, and a lot easier to find with the metal detector.
Oh, okay. So that's something totally. That's serious business.
Yeah,
There.
yeah. It's not very fancy metal detector.
Gotcha.
But it saves
Finds what you need.
It saves a lot of digging.
It's better than walking around with magnets on your shoes or something, hoping you get,
Yeah.
But anyway, well, very cool. So hey, I heard someone had mentioned that I should interview you, and I actually have wanted to interview all the politicians that are running right now, just to kind of get their background and know who they are. Thought it was a good way to do it. But someone had mentioned that I guess your dad had an accident in the past, and they thought it was a pretty interesting story. So before we get to that, I want to get to that. But so you grew up in this area, you went to school locally, assuming.
Yeah.
Graduated from Crescent City?
I'll give you the kind of the,
Okay.
I don't know, the quickie or maybe not so quickie bio. Yeah, I like to say born in Crescent City, but I was born in Palatka, in the hospital in Palatka, and brought home, and we lived in Central Avenue in Crescent City, and I went to elementary school here, middle school, was able to walk to school every day. It was
Nice.
Nice deal. When I was maybe, I don't know, went back and forth a little bit. I think I was in 5th grade when I moved to the house about a mile from here.
Okay.
So we had a house in town. Dad built a house near the farm, moved there. So then I had always either biked or walked to school. I had to take the school bus. And that was, I just thought that was the end of the world, to take the school bus. Anyway, went to Crescent City High School, graduated there, went to...
What year did you graduate?
1985.
Okay.
So,
You're a little older than me then. I'm a 94 grad, so not there, but...
yeah.
Okay, 85.
Fantastic. And
That's
in
cool.
85, I went to St. John's River Community College and had 2 years there, and it was a strange thing. I left high school thinking, oh my God, I'm going to go to college. And I was an honor graduate. I wasn't, did okay. And I was scared to death of college. I just knew I was going to flunk out of college. So anyway, studied, had a great time at St. John's River Community College, and had some of the best teachers I had throughout the system. Anyway, then I went to Florida Southern College. That's in Lakeland. It's a small Methodist college. It's the same college my father went to.
Oh, great.
And had a great time in Lakeland as well. I was a little more social there and my grades weren't quite as good as at St. John's, but it was a good education. I got my BS in business and
Okay.
focusing in marketing. I came back here and started working in the family business.
Was that your plan all along to come back here?
No, it wasn't. You know, I grew up in the business just all the time. You know, working, I was very fortunate because I always had a part-time job, you know, even as a kid, and summer jobs
Right.
and all that jazz. And I just, I don't know, for whatever reason, I wasn't on fire, you know, to come back and do that. And when I got had a marketing professor who was from kind of renowned in the South. He was a Harvard doctor, and he was just fantastic. And we did a marketing program for each of us had to develop a product. And at the time, we had a variety of leather-leaf fern that was different than others, and we had talked amongst ourselves about, hey, we need to patent that one day. And so I just, you know, previous to us patenting that variety, I used that as the focus of my program for that class, and kind of developed it into a product, and you know, fictionally took that on. And I don't know, it got me excited about the business, and I realized, you know, that thing that I've always, you know, been around and kind of take it for granted. It's a, you know, it's a real live business, and it's a part of the, you know, the world economy, and so that got me excited and excited about, you know, being in Crescent City and being on the family farm.
Awesome. So tell us about your dad's accident.
Ooh, well, I came back here in the fall of '89. I think I had a summer class, it might have been '90. Anyway, I had just gotten into the business, you know, finding my way within the business itself. At that time, I met my wife, who she was home. She's from Crescent City, but we were 4.5, 5 years apart in school. We knew each other, but never dated or had anything more than just an acquaintanceship.
Right.
She was home from the University of Alabama for summer. You know, I'm single and have roommates, and you know, we're working and you know, socializing. My buddy and I were playing tennis uptown, and Angie and her best friend came and stopped by, and we kind of reacquainted and started dating. And we dated for 2 years while she was in college. She graduated from college, came home. Her father was Reverend Bill Pope, was our Baptist preacher in Crescent City, First Baptist, for many years.
Okay.
Anyway, we were married, and oh goodness, I don't think we were married 2 or 3 years, and my dad had a farming accident. We do freeze protection. Our plants are semi-tropical, and they're subject to cold damage if it's real cold.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is run water when the temperature and the atmosphere is just right. We'll run water from deep wells, which are run by either electric or diesel motors. And these diesel motors have spinning parts, and my father really at that point in the game didn't freeze protect anymore. You know, he was senior enough that was not his duty. And he went out to just check and see how things were going, and got to a pump, and a piece of his jacket got caught in the drive shaft, and it took both his arms, and in just a fraction of a second. Anyway, one of our neighbors, well, I had first shift, my friend and employee had second shift, and he came up to the fernery, and the water wasn't running. He thought, oh, you know, has it run out of gas? Has it run out of diesel? Has it overheated? He ran in to see what was wrong with the motor, and there was Dad laying on the ground, you know,
Oh my goodness.
in bad shape. So he called a neighbor who right across the street, gentleman, also a fern grower, who had been a medic in Vietnam. He came right away and you know, helped kind of just stabilize us and Dad. They called 911, of course, and the rescue unit was there in no time, and they called me right after. By the time I got there, they had him on a stretcher, all wrapped up, his arms kind of in between his legs wrapped up. and they couldn't get the ambulance into the structure because the ceiling was so low. The ambulance was so high. And they pulled him out, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm going to be okay." He said, "Get your mom and go to the hospital." And they life flighted him, and Mom and I got in the truck and tried to get to the life flight, and we were hoping they would put Mom on the chopper with him. But
Right.
They life flighted him out of Satsuma, and they wouldn't let her go. So
Shands?
they went to trauma center in Jacksonville. So, and then I think that was a Shands.
Right.
But it's and they were fabulous. But we got to.
That's almost unheard of. That's just crazy.
It is.
Just
crazy.
the thought, the mindset of, wow, that's mind-numbing.
Yeah, it was really something. But he survived the ordeal, and there was miracle after miracle in that process. And it was when he got there, by the time we got there, the two doctors, Dr. Clevenger and another doctor, I can't recall his name now. Anyway, they were the trauma men, on the scene at the time. And when we got there, they said, "Look, we had a choice. We had to decide, are we going to save his life or are we going to save his arms?"
Right.
Because the arms were,
Severed
the way they
arms.
were severed, rather than cutting them, they were pulled and stretched,
Okay.
which is really what saved him. If you think about a rubber hose, if you squeeze it, it'll get real thin before it breaks. Well, that's what happened with his blood vessels, and they were pulled, and he had that much blood in him when he got there, but they said if it had been a cut, he just not made it.
Right.
But so they said, "Look, we're gonna save his life rather than his arms." And first they thought about, well, maybe one arm, and they said, "We don't have the time for that. We gotta keep him alive." Well, the next day, Dr. Clevenger came in. It turned out Dr. Clevenger was the number one, the head trauma surgeon for NASA. And every time they did a shuttle launch, they brought him down there, and he was on site in case something went awry.
All right.
Anyway, he said, "I've got to tell you, Mr. Newbold, I'm not, I'm scientifically minded. I'm not terribly religious." He said, "But somebody's watching out for you." We can't remember how many units of blood he had, but it was. He said, if you had a dipstick, you wouldn't show on the stick, and we gave you X amount of units of blood, and if it's possible, we will cross-match those. And you have to go through a bunch of them to make sure they will match and your body will accept them.
Right.
And he said, we didn't have the time to do that with you. We just stuck it in you. We gave you everything we had and sent little samples to the lab, cross-matched them. Every one of them came back perfect match for the other. And he said it doesn't happen. It's, he said, as far as I'm concerned, here's some divine intervention. It was something. It was.
A lot of times I ask a question, have you ever experienced an answer to prayer or seen a miracle happen? So I guess I don't have to answer or ask that question. That's already been resolved.
Dad is a walking miracle, every day.
Wow. So he's still alive?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
He's 83 now.
Oh wow.
And
so he has two mechanical arms, or what does he have?
he has two mechanical arms. He that happened in.
You said it was 80.
Yeah, it was February. It was right around his birthday. He was born Groundhog's Day, and he spent so it happened right at the end of January. Had his birthday in the trauma unit.
Wow.
But I think he was at Shands in Jacksonville for, I don't know, maybe a month. And then they moved him to Chicago Rehab Institute. It was, I think, Chicago or Denver were the big entities that specialized in amputees. He chose to go to Chicago because Dr. Clevenger knew someone there who he recommended. Anyway, he went there and was in Chicago for several months. Anyway, they fitted him initially with electronic myoelectric prosthetics. They were very heavy, and they looked like, I can't remember my favorite part. One of those really early,
Right.
sci-fi movies.
Yeah.
These crazy wrench-looking hands.
Yeah.
And they had one was that, and one looked like a hand. It was a rubberized hand-looking thing, but it would just do that. Anyway, they were so heavy, and he couldn't really do any more than what the hooks did. He said, "Look, I'm not lugging around, 14 pounds of this. I'm not fooling anybody,
Right.
it's not a natural hand." Anyway,
I've got a wife, I've got my kids.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to impress anybody.
I'm not trying to impress anybody. He went through the program in Chicago quickly. By September of the same year, he had new prosthetics, had his Tahoe fitted so that he could drive, and he was driving by September. So it was just
that's amazing.
amazing. He's had a number of issues related to prosthetics over the years, but it hadn't stopped him. He is,
Is he still in the firm business with y'all, or is he retired now? Or do you not want him to know?
No,
I'm just kidding.
After he got back in, after about a year, he got back into the business for a while, but he never got back like he had been.
Mm-hmm.
There were a number of things. His dad was on the Crescent City Cemetery Association at the time, and they called me up and said, "Hey, your dad's, obviously not going to take the meeting. Will you come fill in for him until he gets back?" And here we are, 30 years later.
And you're still filling in?
I'm still filling in for him. So,
and you got a meter to prove it. So
that's right. That's right.
That's cool. That's cool. So what caught your attention? Again, I don't know who's over county or District 1, so we're not looking to, badmouth it, nothing like that. But what, brought you to the point where you thought this would be a next step in life?
Thing, well, however, growing up, I guess looking back on it now, Dad has always been involved in something, whether it was JC's or Rotary or the Fern Cooperative or the Cemetery Association. He did a 2-term stint on the school board when I was a kid. He's always been involved in something, and I guess, I don't know if that rubbed off on me or I just modeled that. But when I got out of college, I got into our Fern Cooperative, took a leadership role there, started being active with the Farm Bureau, ended up volunteering at the fair for a friend of mine. Didn't have enough people to move hogs in the hog barn, and he called and said, "Look, I need help, come help me." And one of the county commissioners saw me doing that and thought, "Oh, here's a nice young man who I can appoint to this fair board." And
right.
So I consented to do that, and really kind of fell in love with that fair culture, and it's such a great organization that it melded youth, ag, education, community, all into one thing.
Okay.
And my wife and I had been youth leaders at the Methodist church in town at this time, and I don't know, just all the things that I was active in, that was that organization had it all.
Right.
So anyway, I ended up after a little while becoming the chairman of that organization, and in that we would interact with county administration, with the sheriff's department, with the road department, maintenance, all kinds of different things as we were developing a plan for the fairgrounds. And anyway, at some point, I've been on there a long time, and somebody said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing something else in the county?" And I felt like a good fit and a good time in my life, and felt like a good time, in where we are now.
Of course. How long has the fairgrounds been out there in that area?
75 years.
Oh.
It's been there
Okay.
quite a while.
Because somebody told me yesterday in an interview that I guess where the ball field is for like a high school. They used to have the fair out there sometime. Maybe it was a different type of fair or
Must have
something.
been something else. The
Yeah, maybe.
very first fair was held on St. John's Avenue or and there's some adjacent streets right by the courthouse.
Okay.
And then I don't know what year the first fair was held at its current grounds, but some of those buildings were built in the 1950s. And it's been held there at its present site for a long, long time.
Wow. So, it's interesting. So, anything else that you want to share or tell or? I always like to ask that. Sometimes people have something on their heart they want to share. So when I talked to you about this the first time, you were intrigued because you thought it was a neat idea. I guess you've never been recorded on a podcast before.
Never.
And you've not even watched any of them yet, so you really don't know what to expect.
I did not know what to expect. And
I put filters on there, so like right now I'm gonna have like a clown on your face, and you look like no, I'm just kidding. There's nothing. It's a raw recording. I don't really change anything. I cut out the very beginning because normally I'm sitting down and trying to get situated. I have a pinched nerve, so I move around a lot. So if you ever see me doing something weird, it's not that I'm disinterested. It's just I got a pinched nerve. But
it's funny when you told me what you were doing, and I started looking around a little bit to find your podcast in the podcast world, and
right.
I came across a great growing podcast, and I went down that rabbit hole, and I never got to to preview what you've been doing.
So ours is actually not even on a podcast format yet. It's actually, my daughter said, "Dad, it's not a podcast." I'm like, "It is." She's like, "No, you're doing video." I'm like, "Yeah, but it does qualify." But my goal is to get a few out of the way, which this is I think you'll be number, I don't know, somewhere close to the 15 to 20 range.
Wow.
But I release one every week, but with the political climate right now, I decided next week I'm gonna try to do 10 in a row every day.
Oh, wow.
So like 5 and 5 for 2 weeks in a row. I try to do one each day just to kind of introduce our candidates right before the election.
So what is the best, quickest, easiest?
So the only way right now is through Facebook.
Okay.
Is to look up Putnam Personalities Podcast on Facebook. Eventually, I will pull those videos, and then I will pull the audio out, and I'll upload those to a podcast format.
Okay.
So it's more a podcast format. So, yeah, like I said, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, I ripped the bottle label off because I don't know if I'm even supposed to show sponsors. So, I mean, I don't have sponsors. I don't know if I'm supposed to advertise. So I'm like, I'll pull the label off. Just, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing.
Well,
I'm doing it for fun.
I was completely impressed that someone in our community was even doing it. So,
yeah, it's a hobby. Yeah. I like to meet people. I thought it'd be a great way. It's a way to preserve, conversation. I've got about, and you weren't even on the list, so I'm going to have about 50 people that I want to interview that I thought of at the beginning.
Wow.
And I'm going through that list slowly. And then, of course, when you're on the list now, but I mean, you're here now, I'm here now, but at first, it started out with, okay, so it kind of starts with my grandpa, a long time ago, D-Day survivor, didn't know his story. We wanted to sit down and talk with him. None of the grandkids know anything really. It's interesting because both of his legs were blown up on D-Day on the shore at Normandy. And so he was flown to London for the reason of removing his legs. And then when he got there, the electricity went out and they had to fight to preserve his legs, which preserved his legs. So his legs never were taken off, but he spent his whole life with canes and braces. And so he'd always complain about heart problems and stuff. He had shrapnel still in him. He had a little container, a container this big full of shrapnel. But when he died, he had about that much more that came out of him. But it was so close to his heart, they couldn't remove it. So anyway, we all sit down one day. I don't remember what year it was, probably 2000-ish, something like that, before podcast was even a thing. And we're like, Grandpa, we called him Pepe. It's French. And, Pepe and Meme. So we'd like to hear your story. We want to record it. So the whole family gets together. And he sits down in his chair and he's like, I don't want to do this. We're like, come on, like the whole family's here. I got a bunch of cousins, we're all here. He didn't want to do it. So to this day, I still don't know everything that happened. Then my one cousin, the one cousin that he lived with towards the end of his life, she brought him for show and tell the class and did a paper on it. She lost her paper and he told her everything.
Oh my goodness.
And she doesn't remember any of it. And it's just so aggravating. So with that being said, I have people, and as a pastor, I do funerals. And so as I'm doing a funeral, sometimes I'm getting information. I'm like, if I'd have known this 3 months ago. Like, this would have been cool to talk about and find out more, but a lot of people don't know about their families. We heard this, we heard that. So I'm like, it'd be neat to sit down and just record some of those conversations and have. And since I've been doing this, everywhere I go, like I'm at the store the other day, and a lady said, she said, my son-in-law or whatever, he was in the Olympics in Atlanta. I'm like, what? She goes, oh yeah, he was a weightlifter. I'm like, so she gave me his name, and then I go somewhere else and I hear about a guy that I've been buying books a lot. I collect books anyway, but I got a book in my office I bought the other day. A guy in Interlaken who was in Vietnam, and he was an engineer, and somebody got the story and wrote a book about him. So now I'm trying to get him, and so I'm starting to learn more and more about people. Of course, you have Mary Wisham. I don't know if you know who she was, but she was a baseball player who, during the World Series, played in Wrigley Field because the men were at war.
Come on.
And she was actually the secretary of our church, and so she lived right down the street from my house. So, in the movie League of Their Own,
yes,
that was about her.
No.
So but there's all these stories in our community. Crescent City.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but if I'm not mistaken, the new King Kong movie, the guy that's directing it is from Crescent City High School.
Yeah, there's a young
So,
man here. He's
all kinds of stuff like that.
Director.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a, I don't know, it's an admiral, a Middleton from Pomona who was up at the very highest levels of the military.
Really?
And I mean, just, there's some real interesting folks from around Putnam County.
Yeah. If you watch the podcast, you can, one we've done, I think it was episodes 6 and 7 maybe, you had to do it too, but husband and wife, they're teachers out at Interlaken High School, and he talks about how he was one of the last troops out of Iraq, and he's actually on Time Magazine right behind the general, and
Wow.
and talks about what he did and where he was when Bin Laden was captured. And so, I mean, but everybody has a story, and some aren't as unique as other people, but they still have a story. And my goal is just to kind of capture that and get to know people. I don't know. I love doing that. It's a hobby. So.
Well, thank you for doing it. It's really
Yeah.
exciting. And as I come across somebody that just seems super interesting, I'll send
Send
you
it my
their
way.
name. Yeah.
Don't tell them I gave you their number. I'm just kidding. But yeah, send me away. Or send it away. Anything, before you send me away, anything else you want to add, talk about, anything?
No,
Okay.
I didn't come in with an agenda.
Yeah, neither did I.
When you said we weren't political, it's neat to be able to sit down and talk with you, and I know somebody in Hollister. And,
Yeah. You have any questions for me?
well, you mentioned you were a pastor at Hollister.
Yes, sir.
How did you find Hollister?
How did I find Hollister? That is the most unique, interesting thing, and that's why in my mind, in my opinion or my mindset, is it's a God thing, honestly. And what's interesting, and before I go there, I just ate at 3 Bananas.
Yes.
So I've never been there before. I've been by there a couple times. They were closed on the so I just went there. Interesting enough, my waitress just moved here from Bozeman, Montana, which is where Yellowstone is. So,
Yes.
And I said, oh, I've been to Yellowstone. I was just showing her the pictures I had. So with that being said, 2013, Christmas 2012, I should say, my wife won a trip, and she could pick one of 5 places from JCPenney on a little button thing. So I don't know. Anyway, she won a trip, and so we picked Yellowstone.
Wow.
So we go out to Yellowstone, and while we were there, just some different things happened, and we came back. And right when we got back from Yellowstone, we literally got out of the airplane. We rented a car, and then we drove home, which is about an hour away to Spring Hill. We spent the night, did our laundry, and then we drove to San Diego, flew back to DC, flew back into Tampa, and then, but yeah, we put so many miles, it was crazy. But we were going to go on vacation. So long story short, we were going on vacation to San Diego to begin with. We won this trip, so we made it into this big long, so we flew there, it was just crazy. Like a 2.5, 3 week period. We did all this stuff. So anyway, when I got back off the plane, we had a youth activity that night with our teenagers, and when we got the teenagers picked up, like, I can't explain it, but it was like my heart was like totally removed from what I was doing. Like, it was to the point where I was driving to the youth activity, and I was just like, and my dad never even went to things with us like this, and he was with me that day, and I told the kids, I'm like, hey, I said, I can't explain it, man. It's like, it wasn't that it was just like removed me, like I felt sick to my stomach, like I shouldn't be doing this anymore. I don't know how to explain it.
Wow.
So I turned the van around, And we went back to the church. I got the kids pizza. We played volleyball. And then afterwards, I told the pastor, I'm like, look, you're going to have to find something else. Like, my heart is totally removed from this. Like, I don't know how to explain it.
Wow.
And so I was praying a prayer, and a friend of mine 2 weeks later called and said, hey, you ever thought about pastoring a church? And I said, absolutely not. But my prayer was this. My prayer was, as I was going through a study with the kids on Wednesday night, I was using video games as a background for a Bible lesson. And we talked about the game Pitfall and how sometimes, people, they fall into traps in life and you got to get up and keep moving, just kind of stuff like that. And then I had used Mario Kart as an example. I'm like, sometimes I feel like Mario Kart, like I'm just like doing the same thing over and over again. I'm not accomplishing anything, going in circles. And then I said, I want to be like Zelda. I want to carry my little sword, and I want God to lead me to doors I never knew existed.
Wow.
And that was legitimately my prayer and my last Bible lesson with those kids. And then I get this phone call about pastoring a church. And when I hung up, I was like, wait a minute. I'm praying that God would lead me to doors that I never knew existed. So I hung up the phone, and then I was really convicted. I'm like, okay. I get this weird phone call. So I called the guy back the next day. I said, look, if I know it's the right thing to do, I would go. Of course I would.
Wow.
But I've never felt like I wanted to do that. So with all that being said, a month went by and nothing really came of it. And then finally someone from the church actually called and said, hey, our pastor just, he did resign and he's leaving on July 4th or he's moving, whatever. Would you come in next week and fill in for us? And so I said I would. And I got there and I shaved my beard. I went and bought a suit because I don't wear suits. And so I show up at Hollister, and I'm wearing a suit with no beard. I just felt so like fake and different, But they asked me to come back the next week, and I said, well, do I have to wear a suit coat? And they said, no, we don't care about your suit coat. So I returned my suit on Monday morning, kid you not. Came back the next week, and we've been there ever since, honestly. But with all that being said, the interesting thing, a lot of people know this, is after being there for a couple months, I go to the mailbox, and I get a letter with a guy's name on it. I'm like, that's weird. The guy's name on the letter had the same name as a guy that I knew in my church.
Okay.
And so when I came back to visit the old church, I said, hey, what's funny is at our post office box at our church, the new church, I said, I got a letter with your name on it. It reminded me, he goes, in Hollister? I'm like, yeah. He goes, Hollister Baptist? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I was the principal of the school there. I'm like, what? I had known this guy for years and never knew that he was the principal of the school for like a year. Wow. And literally, I got the mail. So here's this guy I've known, and I actually got a piece of mail with his name on it and found out that it really was him. Had no clue. And I'm like, of all the places where Hollister, like, no one's ever heard of it. Not where we were from anyway. But since we've been here, though, we've been here starting our 12th year. And it's been fun. It's been good. Lord's blessed us. And I've been able to get involved in the community and meet a lot of great people. And like yourself, people like yourself and others. So I've enjoyed it.
Well,
but
what you're doing.
It's a long story, but Hollister is weird for me. I don't know. It was a weird thing for us to show up there.
It is funny, you don't know all the interaction and the interplay between these communities. I went out to the Interlochen 4th of July parade, and they had, was it the Interlochen and Hollister fire departments there, and they're neat little rivalries, all over the county, and little ways communities work together, and we live in a great place.
Yep, it is. It's a great county, and when we first came, our very first interview, I told Colonel Wells that. He was my first interview, and I said, moving here, we're really nervous because we heard all these statistics and things, and over time, we learned that some of those things are true. It's not things you can't overcome.
Sure. But
also, though, we did come to try and make a difference, and I think we should all, instead of complaining about everything we see wrong, if we all stood up and just make a difference where we can. We can't change everything.
Yeah, we're not going to change the world, and with little small steps.
We can leave our fingerprint somewhere that
absolutely
shows that we were there in a good way, of course.
In a good way, and that's. That's
we don't need detectives coming looking for fingerprints. Not that type of fingerprints.
Not that type.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, well, hey, I appreciate it. It was a real pleasure talking with you and getting to know more about your business. And
I feel like we could have talked for hours. We didn't.
Oh,
we didn't cover hardly anything.
Yeah, I don't think we did. So, thank you, and may God bless you.
Thank you so much.